Hello everyone, welcome to week 5 of the IRIS and NITK Bootcamp. I'm Parth Mittal back again with another video. So this time we'll be looking at the V of MVC, which is views. So our application looks pretty nice to be honest, but there's one thing missing, which is styling. It looks pretty bad to be honest. So let's learn how to style it, and let's also learn about views at the same time. So if I come back to my VS Code, I have my repository over here. Let me just clear this out. So this is the project directory. I pulled, just pull it from the main, and you'll see week 5 now. And similarly, you will have the activity tracker. There's not much difference in the week 5 section. It's mostly for you to do it. So I think let's get started. But before that, let us, as always, you can find the README and all of the instructions to follow the video along with an article. So the article is already there. So if you do not, if you want assistance on anything, you can always follow the article. Alright, let's get started. Views are basically just quick recap what views are. So view, simply put in one line, it is responsible for presenting data appropriately. And I think I'll introduce you to some things and we'll get started. So in a Rails application, the views are stored inside app/views. Alright, so all of the views are stored over here, and basically each controller has their own views, and the name of the view file must match the action name exactly. So I think I'll cover this slightly later, but the next information is that views are essentially just HTML files. So if you go back, if you just open views/activities, one second, yes, let me just increase my font so that this is clearly visible. I think that should be better. Alright, so maybe one more step, and this should be quite big, maybe one less. Okay, so if you see, essentially all the view files inside Rails have the extension of .html.erb. Generally you would have seen that the files are .html, but Ruby has this templating engine, because of which it has this file extension of .erb. And at the core of it, if you open any file, let's say we open index.html.erb, you'll see that it's very similar to simple HTML, just with some additional Ruby-like code, which basically allows you to write Ruby code inside your HTML as well. That is it. I'll come to what exactly each of this is slightly later on. Now the next question you will ask me is what are we going to use to style our application. So if you have not already seen the video, we've already released the video on Bootstrap. So we'll be using Bootstrap, which is a free and open source CSS framework. If I can just show you the link to that, this is basically, you can just head over to getbootstrap.com, and this is basically what Bootstrap is. It allows you to build fast and responsive sites with a lot of components readily available. It just contains some boilerplate code already available. If you just head over to docs, you can just see that a lot of the stuff is already available. Okay, so if you've followed the YouTube video, let me also provide the link to the YouTube video. Okay, I think you can just head over to the IRIS NITK YouTube channel, and you'll find the YouTube video to that. And in that video, we've also covered how to install it, especially for Rails, because these methods are slightly different. But nonetheless, you can follow this. But like, we basically derive the installation instructions from here. So if you have not already done that, you can follow that. But for this tutorial that I'm going to tell you, we have already installed Bootstrap for you. So no need to worry, you don't have to install it. We have already done the hard work all that stuff for you. So if you just now head over to this file called gem file, by the way, I used Control P to go to my gem file. To look at any file in VS Code for that matter, pretty handy shortcut. So you can just add this particular line gem.bootstrap, so you'll see that Bootstrap is now installed, and in general you can just follow the instructions on the video, as well as the article will have the instructions. Alright, anything else did I mention? Another thing that we have added is this file called darkmode.css. This basically contains some essential styling which you'll be using, and it basically creates a dark mode out of the box for you guys, which if you see, if you're on the server right now also, you'll see that it's already slightly black. It looks bad itself, but I love dark themes, so why not? So this is basically the styles we're inheriting from. That's already provided to you, which is located inside app/stylesheets/application.css and darkmode.css. Alright, and another thing that we've used is Bootstrap icons, which we'll come to that later on. Alright, so the next thing for which we had a slight look at is that the views are located inside app/views, and essentially the project directory will always look like app/views, and then it will have a folder for that particular model. So our model is called activities, and that's why all the view files for activities are located inside this folder. And there is this folder called layouts, where some common this thing will be there. So before I jump out to layouts, I'll just cover what activities has. If you see it, when you did scaffolding, Rails magically created all of these files for you as well. So all of the basic CRUD operations like index, edit, new, show are already created by Rails. And if you notice, the name of the file is exactly same as the name of the controller action. We had called it a def index, if you remember. So if I just open the controller, controller, activities controller, if you see index, and the name of the file is also index. Similarly, show, new, edit, activity, etc. Right, that's more Rails magic. And coming back to layouts, layouts basically has these basic layouts you would see. So now you see the HTML, right? So basically let's do one thing. I'm gonna run my server and just show you what is happening. So I'm just using my WSL now to run the server, just going seeding into it and running Rails as. Yep, the server is started, and let's go back to here. So if you just go to localhost 3000, let's wait for it to load. Oops. Oh, we see some cool styling already applied. Anyways, I'll go through the styling nonetheless. Okay. Yes. So yes. So what I was saying was, if you head over to the index page, and if you come back to the index.html.erb file, you'll see only this much code, right? And you would ask me that, hey, where's the HTML code? That's basically coming from application.html.erb. This you will find very similar to the normal HTML file. You'll have the usual HTML tags, the HTML, the head tag, and then the body tag, etc. So the usual HTML thing with a little bit of Rails stuff. I'll cover. This is basically a Rails way of writing to link the style sheets, but I'll cover what these tags, etc. mean. And then inside the body is basically what we have written is yield. Now yield basically means that any of the files that you want to render will come inside this body section. Alright, so the next thing we can do is, let's start with creating a navbar. So if you see, there's no navbar at the top right now. Before we move on, let me just quickly clear out some styling which I have left by mistake, and we'll add that back, not a problem. but for now let's just remove it so that it matches with your whatever you would receive when you pull the thing. So I'll just remove this styling which by mistake I left it while styling. So now if you go back and refresh, you should see something like this. I think this is how your repo will look like. So if you go to new, the form looks very ugly, and basically everything looks quite ugly. But anyways, that's what we are going to do. We're going to style this and make it really nice looking. Coming back to where we were, right? So let's start with creating a navbar. Before we do that, let us do one thing to keep things nice and clean. Let's go to app/views, and I'm pretty sure you will not see the shared folder as of now. So just do one thing, is that inside the views, let me quickly delete this, and I'll show you how to do that. Just delete. Right, so go inside views, click on this folder icon, and then you can just write shared, and inside this create a new file by pressing this icon. Let's call it _navbar.html.prb. Right, so I'll explain what this means. Now, if you remember, when writing Ruby, we break up complex methods into smaller functions. Likewise, when writing views, we also break up the complex view into smaller pieces, which can be used at different places. Now, all of these files, if you see, there are some files that have this underscore at the beginning, right? They start with an underscore. The edit one does not, but form does. So all of the files that start with an underscore are called as partials, right? They're known as partials. Now what these partials do is that they begin with the leading underscore, and you can pass variables to these partials using the locals keyword, and they're like a smaller subset of the entire view, right? So like if you head over to, I'll show you how you do that, but this edit, if you see, it's basically saying render form, right? And the form exists over here. So it's telling that inside edit, I do not want to put repeated code inside this, and at different places I'll be using the same partial. Instead of doing and copy pasting the code, I'll just make a partial out of it, which can be reused at multiple places. And that's the whole idea of partials. Let's quickly create a navbar, and then I think you'll understand very clearly how to do that. Because navbar is something that you use on all the pages. So we've created a navbar file, and now what we're going to do is we'll use the Bootstrap component, which is known as let me search for that. It's called navbar, right? So you can just copy paste this navbar and it should work. But I've already created a slightly different navbar, like it's derived from here itself, but it does not have all the not useful attributes. So you will find all of that inside the article, and let me just quickly let's do one thing. I will put this on the right, and I put my PS code on the left. So I'm just going to grab the code from the article. So this is where I'm taking the code from. I'm going to copy this and put it over here, and you can obviously type it looking in the video. So that's essentially what it is. We're using a navbar, HTML element, giving you a class navbar, expand, GBG, dark, etc. Let me expand for now. If you remember from the Bootstrap video, you'll know how these essentially work. A tag for some links, some buttons, and a div for some links, where we have only one link, which is the /stats page. Alright, so we've added the navbar, but let's try to refresh. You would say nothing happened, right? Because you don't see a navbar, it's just everything is still the same. That's because even though you created a navbar, you still have to tell Rails that, hey, I've created a navbar, now render the navbar, right? So we'll head over to application, we go to layouts /application.html.erb, and inside this file, inside the body tag, what we're going to do is we will render our navbar. So what we'll do is we'll create a Rails tag. We'll say equals render shared just quickly maximize this so that it's very clear. Share slash navbar and close it, right? So this is how the syntax looks. This is basically the syntax for rendering. Let's do one thing else, switch off Copilot, because I don't want all of us to have suggestions from Copilot. Right, so yeah, basically I was saying that you render partials using the syntax render, and okay, before that let's cover something called as embedded Ruby. Now you'll see a lot of this, you'll see a lot of this, right? So as I was mentioning, using .erb, you can, it's called embedded Ruby, and you can put Rails code inside HTML files. So there are two ways of invoking that. So in a lot of places you will see this syntax where you have an angle braces, a percentage sign, and equal to sign, and then closing with another percentage and an angle braces. Whatever you write inside this will be visible inside on the Rails page. So if I just say okay, right, and if I create another one, this time remove the equal to sign, let's see what happens. So if you just refresh, first of all you now see the navbar, right? It looks pretty good. And another thing you see is that there's this hey, right? It is above the navbar and it says hey, but the next hey, or let's say hello, right? This thing does not appear here, even though I am refreshing it a lot of times. It does not appear because whichever has this equal to sign, which means it will be rendered, but if it doesn't have the equal to sign, it's not going to be rendered, right? There's more embedded Ruby that we'll come across slightly later when we style the other pages. I'll try to cover style as well as explain what each file is doing. But for now, yes, that looks good. Let's see if I can do another thing. Another thing that while we're at this file, what we can do is create a div. Let me switch to HTML, and we can create a div.container. I'm using emmet over here, so if we just type div.container, create a container for you, and you can use to move this line up, you can use Alt plus up, it will move up and down, right? So that is it. And now if you see, what's essentially going to happen is that all of our content is going to be wrapped nicely inside some padding and margin. So if you just see here as well, it's always has some gap and maintains that gap, right? Awesome. Alright, that looks good. What we can now do is, so we're done with creating the navbar, and it looks pretty decent. Next, what we can do is, let's move on to the index page. This looks quite shitty, right? So let's try to improve the index page. So let me close the application, let me close the navbar, and let's do one thing, slightly make this bigger, and it's open, and we'll move on to, let's close layout, let's go share, let's go to index.html.erb, right? So another, again you'll notice that there is the embedded Ruby and it says notice and everything else, and I'll cover this part, but before, let's just quickly style this as well. So we will give it a class, and let's say text primary. You would ask, where is the primary coming from? Again, you can do dark mode of CSS, and all of the primary colors and everything are defined over here. And obviously you can customize this, you can change the color and it will affect over here as well. Okay, so I'm going to text primary. If I just refresh, it's now have this nice neon green color. The next thing we can do is, I'll tell you what this basically does. So if you remember from the controller section, the last week's video, we had covered what these @variables are. So this is called an instance variable. So if I just quickly open the activities controller, oops, not this one, activities controller, you now see that this has this @activities, and the same variable is used over here as well. And basically, this basically says that get copy all the activities, basically at activities activity.all, and dot each do. So this is very Ruby like. It says for each activity do something, and this activity is basically the name of each activity. So getting a normal C terminology, you would say for I or let's something like if it's Python, you would say for I in range, something like that. So that I becomes your variable. Here also your I is becoming that variable. So you would say for each activity, render the activity, right? So this is very similar to calling the partial method, but it works with the render activity as well. I'll cover what link to is slightly later on, but for now I think it makes sense. So we can start a block which says dot activity or each to activity, and render the activity inside it and render some links inside it, and then just say end, right? So just like we have, in a method we have like def index end, even on the views we start our each block and then end it with end. And if you notice, these two do not have an equal to sign because you don't want to render this logic on the front end, right? If you put an equal to sign, this thing exactly will be shown on this thing, and this is not what we want, right? Alright, so let's refresh that. That's one. Let's quickly see what we have next. So to style this, we use something called as the card deck component inside Bootstrap. So if we just Google Bootstrap card deck, you'll be shown this part, and just scroll down, and come on, where's this? Let me turn to left. Card deck, right? So you can read about what card decks are. Basically, you just need a set of equal width height cards next to each other. So you'll see very similar designs in keep notes, etc. So let's do that. I'm gonna just grab some code so that we don't waste a lot of time. Or you know what? I'll just quickly show it to you. Let's give it this a class, and for that let's make this HTML. Yes, let's give this a class, and let's say empty4. It says give it a top margin 4 and give it a card deck. Now we're enclosing all of our all the activity inside a card deck, and then we're saying that hey, for rendering an activity, wrap the activity inside it, which has a class of call sm12 and call md6 and call ld4. So now using mx we just created something, and I'm just going to put this render activity inside this using alt up, and I think that looks nice. So what if I just quickly go through what this means? It's basically saying that let's create a card deck, and each card like basically it's trying to create a grid. If you remember the grid system in Bootstrap, this is saying that if you remember that Bootstrap has these responsive viewpoints. So SM means small, and MD means medium, and LG means large, and all of these are min width breakpoints. So this would mean that for a small device, take up all the columns. So if you remember, there are 12 columns in a Bootstrap grid. Just quickly show you that if you just forgotten, or you just need a quick refresher. Let's open Bootstrap grid system. So we have this diagram over here. This basically means the viewpoints, and it says that it's min width points. And where is that diagram where it has the call? So basically, but anyways, what I'm trying to say is that Bootstrap grids system has 12 columns, and that's how you can break it down. So this says that for small devices, take up all the columns. For a medium device, take 6 columns, which would mean that you'll have 2 cards side by side in one row. And this for large devices, it says that have 4 columns taken up by one card, which means you'll have 3 cards in a row, and the next 3 will go on to the next row, and so on. Right? I hope that makes sense. Let's do another thing. Let's first try to refresh. Let's see what happens. Nothing much happened, because I'll tell you why that did not happen. But let's see. Nothing much happened on like this small viewport, but if you just go big, now you're going to see that there are 3 items. But we will fix this. It looks quite bad right now. But yeah, that's working. So what we can do now is I don't like how this new show this activity and new activity looks. So I'm going to use something known as Bootstrap icons, because you would have seen a lot of times icons are used in modern web designs. So what we can do is, I would like to have a plus button right next to activities instead of having this new activity button right at the bottom. And I think what we can do is inside just after activities, just after activities, let's paste this. So what this is doing, that it creates a small tab inside which there is a link. I'll explain what link to is right after I finish my thing, and creates a plus. So how do I know what to put over here is that you can just head over to this thing called icons.getbootstrap.com, and the way you would install is that you quickly scroll all the way down, and the installation instructions will be provided. But the fastest way is to use a CDN. Okay, but you don't have to worry, we've already provided the CDN inside the application.html.trb. The only thing you have to do is just simply copy that link which you saw on the website and put it on application.html.trb. If you see that there is, oh, we haven't done that, let's quickly do that. Where is my CDN? All the way down, and let's copy this and put it right here. So now we have a link to style sheet which has the Bootstrap icons, and then we can now use Bootstrap icons. So this says that use a class of BIBI plus square, which is defined inside Bootstrap icons. So if you just click on any icon, you'll see this is how you use the font, right? So this is coming from here. I didn't make it, that's what Bootstrap is telling me to do. So, and some text and some margin, and yeah. So if we now refresh, so we now see this pretty cool looking plus button, and we can now remove this link to. Since we're talking about link to, I'll tell you what link to is basically. So in a normal way, what you would do is, let's quickly inspect, and that would make more sense. So if you try to inspect this, or let's do one thing. Let's keep that link, the simple link to as before. Refresh this page, and let's keep this thing over here, the inspect element part. Okay, I'll just inspect the new activity. So if you see by the way, the way you open this quite cool looking DevTools is that you just press Ctrl Shift C, or you can also just right click anywhere on the web page and do inspect, right? So if you see this new activity on HTML, it's rendering as a href, which you would normally see in a new thing, /activity/new and new activity, right? This is how you would see in a normal HTML. You would create a link. But what Rails tells us, it provides us these link to methods, which are basically some already written helper for us, which you can use to create a link. The syntax is that you create a link to, then you write the name of this link to, what you want to display. So if I just make this new and refresh, this now becomes new, right? And then give a comma, and then say new activity path, right? So now you would ask me, what is this new activities path, right? Basically this is coming from Rails route. So if you remember, if you just type some random Rails, this thing, it will say that there's a routing error, but at the same time it tells us all the routes that we have in our application. And over here you can see activities path, new activity path. So these are basically helper methods or helper path URLs that Rails has defined, and we want to leverage these, right? We don't want to create like a / everything for all the links, because web pages have a lot of links, and we want to keep it very nice and clean. So we use new activity path, and to leverage that we have link to helpers, right? And obviously you can also add another more arguments, like you can say class and some class and that will also work, right? As always, you can read more about it in the article that we created. Provided some reference links for you to read more about link to. Right. Let's remove this and come back. So now I've removed the new part from here, and the link to has been moved over here. Right, so we still have access to clicking on plus button, and it takes us to the new page. Okay, another thing I can do is I don't want this, I don't like to show this activity as such, because all the information is anyways there, but It's just a very conventional way of Rails doing it, but I don't like it. I'm going to remove it. You can choose to keep it, that's up to you. Alright. So this is how our application index.html.erb looks like, and I think I've covered everything. Now what we can do is, now you can see that they come nice and next to each other, etc. They look like cards. And if you just try to make them smaller or something, if we just increase this, but let me do one thing. Let me inspect it all over again, and let's try to make this iPhone. So on a phone device, it's going to be one below the other, and if you take like an iPad or something, it's two in a row. Is what I was mentioning. Okay, let's keep it responsive for now. And matter of fact, let's close DevTools. Go back to coding. Alright, so right now this card looks very bad, like there's no distinction between the cards. So let's style the cards as well. Let's quickly go close everything, go back to app/views/activities, and let's open _activity. Now you would ask me, how do I know that the file name is _activity? Now it's a partial, it starts with an underscore, and if you go to index.html, it said render activity, which means that it's rendering this partial. It's the same thing we did with navbar, right? So I've done a lot of styling, and I don't want to type all the styles, so I'm just going to copy the code which we have put in the article, paste it, and let's see the magic. Voila, that looks much better, isn't it? Right, so let's do one thing. Let's quickly close this, and that looks fine. So that looks pretty cool, to be honest. And I'll quickly go over what I've done with the styling if you're interested. And other than that, I think there is no much. Okay, yeah, there's more Rails stuff as well in this. And let's look at the file in depth, and I'll tell you what each thing is doing. Let me close this part. So I've wrapped the entire thing in a card because we're only styling the card for now, and I've given the Bootstrap card class, so you can again head over to this Bootstrap thing and look into cards and etc. Then we've given h4 class and some card title, text primary, some 4 units of padding to the activity. Now one thing you will notice throughout the file is that there is things called activity dot title, activity dot activity type, and activity dot calories. So if you recall, all of these title, activity type, calories, duration, start time, etc. were the part of our model, right? So if you just go to the schema.rb and recall, we have a string title, string activity type, etc. All of this is now available in our view by simply using the dot operator, right? So if you were to do activity dot calories, and if you just go back, and where is my page, and if I just do refresh, so this is now going to change to the calories, right? So using the dot operator, you can access all the attributes of that particular model and use it by using the dot operator. You would ask, why is this activity coming from? That's basically coming from index. We said render activity, and that basically is used over here. Okay, that is for that. And the card also has some additional styling. So if you would like to know more about how we've styled, etc., you'll see that there is some gradient, etc. So all that gradient, etc., I have provided over here. I've added some extra styling, some custom styling over here, some shadows, some gradient, etc. That's it. Now we've created, using the Bootstrap grid system, we create a row, and we just come back and we create. So the first thing is that we have a title, and inside the card body we have given some padding, and then we create a row which basically has the activity type. So we're talking about this particular row. It has the activity type, and then it takes up 9 parts of the column, and then 3 parts are taken by another row of 2 links, basically 1 link and 1 button. So this is another link to the edit button. So again, some Bootstrap icons, pencil icon, and text secondary is similar to text primary, and other color is text secondary, which is that grayish color that we've defined. And again, you would see that it has this edit activity path, and it encloses this activity inside it because this is linking to a specific activity, and it's not a generic link. Like if you remember, this was a new activity link which we had, which is for any new, like it goes to /new. But this one is for a particular activity, So it means that go to edit activity path of this activity, right? And here you see the example of adding some class of using Bootstrap buttons. We have added some class like begin, small, begin secondary, etc. After that, you'll notice that we have a button to tag, which is similar to a link to tag. It's just basically a helper provided by Rails for buttons, and you can read about the button tag more on this particular link. I'll just give you that link. That basically is provided inside the documentation that the article that we prepared. Yes, everything else is very similar. Then again, there is more rows and columns, etc. for styling, and some more icons of coming from Bootstrap icons, activity duration, calories, etc. Now, another cool thing you will notice over here is this round piece of code. So basically, similar to link tools and button tools, helpers, etc. There are also some more helper methods which you can use to sort of manipulate your data only on the view side, right? So if you notice, this date appears in a nicely formatted way. If I remove this part and let's refresh, it's now in this not that good human readable format. But if I added dot in time zone dot strf time and add some particular way of rendering the time, that's going to look much better. Let's see, let's refresh. So that's in a human readable format. So these are some built-in helpers that Rails provides. So you're not actually changing the data on the backend, but you're just changing the way they render on the front end for a more user-friendly experience. You can also create your own helpers by defining the helpers. So if you just go back to this, you find that in the app folder there's also a folder called helpers, and it automatically created some files for you. And inside activity helpers you can also define some helpers and what helpers are, etc. You can read more about them on this particular link, which is also given to you inside the documentation. Alright, so with that, we had already styled our page and that looks pretty cool. Let's move on to styling our, let's style our form now, because if you now click on plus, it still looks very bad. So let's do one thing. Let's go to underscore form again, that's a partial, and let's take a closer look at how it looks. So what you would notice now is this form with tag, right? Now form with tags takes a model, and in our case the model is activity, and it generates the HTML on its own. Basically Rails has this, again, some helper method called form with, which generates a form for this particular model. And what you would notice is that it already knows what attributes this model has. So now you can do form.textfield for the attribute called title. You can do form.textfield for the attribute called activity type. So all of this is made available by Rails, and similarly it has activity.errors. So if you are having any problems while saving the record, all of the errors will be printed in this section, and that's also provided by Rails. Pretty cool. Other than that, yes, there are a lot of form helpers here. So form.label creates a label tag. So if we go back to the thing and inspect again, let me inspect this title quickly. So this is creating a label, but when we see our code, that still looks like form.label and for the activity title. So that's being Rails magic over here, and it has the style display block as well. You can do that for everything. So this form.textfield creates an input type of text, which says textfield, for the attribute title, and Rails also automatically generates the name and ID attributes for the HTML tag. Similarly, you can go through the rest, and it has this date time field and text field and number field and so many more, links to which are provided in the article, right? So for styling the form as well, we'll use Bootstrap form. So if you go to form, you'll find a bunch of form controls, etc. And since we don't have a lot of time, let's just paste this, and if we now refresh, boom, that looks much better. Looks like a cool gradient effect to the card, the black theme and everything. And let's quickly create activity. Let's see if it's working. And you would also notice another very cool thing is that with Bootstrap form controls, you get this date picker and time picker on its own. And let's give a duration of 30 minutes. Give calories of 3, 4, 5, create activity. Yes, so that creates this activity. If I go back, there are 3 activities now. Awesome. Let me just quickly go through what styling we provided. So we use the div class form group. Again, all of this is coming from forms. So form group, and it has the display block style, and it has some class of form control and some margin, etc. Everything has a form control and margin, and that's where the, if you notice that there is a nice padding to each input field and this nice gradientish border effect that comes when you click on it. All of that's coming from the form control class that we've given. Again, the form.submit is creating an input button type submit, which has a class of what we provided, the BTN Bootstrap button and some primary color, etc. Awesome. So we have done with the forms as well. Again, we have wrapped in the entire form inside a card. Like if you see, it also has this gradient coming with the card, and we use Bootstrap buttons and form controls. Last thing you would notice is that we have not styled the new show and edit actions yet, but still everything works pretty nice. But you'll see these loose ends are still left. Like if you just click on plus, you see these back to activities. It doesn't look very good. And if you go to the edit page, it already has this form already styled. I'll tell you why that's happening. But let's just go to edit.html. So basically the files with name of edit, new, just keep that open, edit, and new show. So what these files are basically, they correspond to the name of the action that I told you in the controller. And this is like the entry point of that controller. So the controller looks for the file name with new. And what new is doing is that it's rendering the form, right? You very clearly understand why that's happening. And that form is basically the underscore form that we have over here, right? So if the Rails first looks at the new file, the new.html.avi file, and new file is in turn returning the form. That is why when you click on plus, you see the form. Similarly with edit, it renders the form, and Rails is super smart and it already fills the values for you. So if you click on edit, it knows that it's coming from the edit action and it pre-fills the values for you, so you don't have to enter it again. Similarly with show, it renders add activity, so this time it's rendering underscore activity and not the form because it just wants to show it. So if you click on edit and you should click on show this activity, it just has information about it, right? And you'll see that the link to edit this activity is coming from here, active activities is coming from here, destroy is coming from here. Just to quickly style all of this, I'm going to style this new page, and similarly with this show page, there's not much style happening over here. Just cleaned up a little bit and added some text primary and container, etc., so that everything is nice and tidy. Let's do the same thing with edit as well, very similar. Just remove some buttons and that's it. If you just go back to our application, maximize, refresh, all that's gone because the edit delete buttons are anyways here. When you click on edit and you will get the form, you can click on delete and that will get deleted and says activity was successfully destroyed. Awesome. So we have created the entire application, and after this, you can, what next task you can do is you can style the /stats page that you created last time, and you can also improve the design of the authentication pages, the sign in, sign out, etc. And right now this doesn't look that great, so you can use something called as Bootstrap alerts or toasts for that matter. So if you just go on to alerts, you'll see that they appear like this, and you can obviously style them, etc. So you can style that. You have to style the stats page, the authentication pages, the sign in, sign out, and password reset, and the toast, etc. And whatever else you would like to style. If you would like to make some changes, you would like to change the colors, etc. All of that is welcome, and you will have to see the styles that you would like to create. You can change the colors from here. Like if you want to change the primary color, you just go ahead and go all the way to the top of the dark mode.css and change the primary color. wherever the primary is mentioned, you just change it and you'll have new colors. That's it. Thank you so much for watching. Bye bye.